Bluff City.
What's up, everybody? Doing something a little different tonight. My name is Uncle Buck. I am one half of the sports show, podcast show on Bluff TV Media, and we're doing something a little different. Go live tonight for the first time that we told everybody. I know we've premiered live and we've been in the chat with everybody, but this is live. And so here I am, North Mississippi. I've had a little bit of time to digest college football playoff rankings, and just wanted to hop in. I see we've got a few people live tuned in with me tonight. We're on the Bluff City Media YouTube page and on their Twitter page. And so if you're in here, give me a comment, say hey. I want this to be very informal, very interactive. As you know, I can talk, I can hear myself talk for a long time, but I also know that probably not the most entertaining thing in the world is just to hear a monologue from me. So I do want to have some interaction with you guys. We'll chat. Well, let's just off the top. So we'll put up. This is the college football playoff rankings. This is week number 2, and there was a lot of changes because it's some big upset and some there's a lot of movement in this week. So I want to take myself off the screen for a minute, throw up the rankings, and we'll just discuss. So, number 1, so Oregon 10-0, just really all everybody that's not named Boise State and Ohio State, and both of those teams you can see on this bracket here. So, Oregon State, Oregon number 2, Oregon number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5. The Hoosiers 10-0 for the first time ever. I believe it's the first 10-win season ever, and it just happened to be 10-0. BYU, the Mormons. Listen, there may be something to Mormonism, the way that they got that call, that answered prayer, and that bogus penalty against Utah late Saturday night. So it's just the narrowest of things that you can imagine. They're at 6, Tennessee at 7, Notre Dame rising from the ashes. Media goal like Notre Dame. Up to 8 after an early, I believe, week 2 loss to Northern Illinois. Miami falls all the way to 9 after they finally get what was on the field. Georgia Tech, the ultimate underdog, beat Miami in Georgia on Saturday. Goes Miami to fall to 9, Alabama to 10, and the highest ranked 2-loss team right behind them, Ole Miss. You can't see me, but if you saw me earlier, Ole Miss hat, diehard rebel here. If I'm being honest with you, Ole Miss would have lost scores. I don't know if I keep doing this right now, but Ole Miss 11, Boise State 13, Georgia 12. So the way that the rankings reflect the bracket is, if you don't know this already, but the top 4 teams, the top 4 conference champions get the top 4 teams and the first round 5. So that would be Oregon out of the Big 10. Keep on say top 12. Oregon out of the Big 10. Texas out of the SEC. BYU out of the Big 12, and Miami at 9-1 out of the ACC. And the rest of it's acted like this. The 13th ranked team, Boise State, being the highest ranked with the 5 schools, the 12th seed. So they've got a Boise State, Ohio State matchup in the first round, a Notre Dame Tennessee matchup, Ole Miss and Penn State in the rematch of the Peach Bowl from last year, and Alabama in the 10-7 matchup, beating up against Texas. So the big things that changed, obviously, Georgia dropping from number 3 to number 12. And that's really the worst way to do this, because when you know that you've got a group of 5 champions, it's an automatic first, more than likely the 12th team. Just not, just because you're top 12 does not mean you're safe. Georgia is on the hot seat. But let's just see what here. There's a lot of season in front of us. And if we just go through, uh, I'm going to put this in ways like who I believe Oregon is. I mean, they're the number one team there. They are only undefeated team, not in Indiana, and so they could lose the conference championship game with us. They are going to. Texas, the SEC schools are really, and this is SEC country. We are this network is based on Memphis. There's a lot of privilege. There's a lot of Memphis ties, and we unless we try to bring in a lot of flavor from the SEC. So that's where we'll kind of hang out for a second. But I don't know that there's any that feels good. So if you just start at the top, Texas, who is number 2 seed right now. Uh, right now, they are the best team to the highest ranked team. They still have a renewal of one of their best rivals, college football, where they go to college to play Texas A&M the last week of the Bible. So that is not. I don't know the Texas necessarily a loss in. It's the way that Georgia took their second loss and you see what happens when they take their second loss. Let's get this here. Ohio State. Ohio State plays Indiana this weekend. If they beat Indiana, they're going to beat Michigan. They're probably a safer than somebody. If we can have a rematch for Oregon State, and if we want that, excuse me, can you hear me? Let's start over. All right. All right. I'm Uncle Buck of the Two Buck Sports Show, and this is my 2 cents, and we're going to talk about college football. Appreciate Daniel Greer. I've been going on here for just a few minutes now, and no one's told me my mic is turned off. So tried to tell you guys to start the show that this is my first time going live. This is our first time as one of the 2 Bucks for the 2 Buck Sports Show on Bluff City Media that we have ever done totally live. So, hey, I guess we're going to have some hiccups. So, if you catch this YouTube video later, then we'll pick up here. Okay. So let's start from the top. The college football playoff rankings, the second edition, came out tonight. This is the second week that they've done this, and they always kind of wait till later in the season, which is probably how all rankings should be done, because what you find is a lot of times that the preseason rankings or week 1 and week 2, if you're ranked highly in those initial polls, then you are thought of more favorably for the rest of the season. And you've kind of gotten that inherent bias about you. And so that's what we're dealing with. And I think that's the reason why that the College Football Playoff Committee waits until after week 9 or 10 to do this. And I think it's a good idea. So let's throw up the poll here. This is what was announced on ESPN tonight. This is the top 12, the playoff rankings. So we'll start here. The top 4 seeds surprisingly hadn't changed. And so Oregon still number 1, undefeated. The only undefeated not named Indiana. If you want to look at biases, then that's it, because Indiana was thought to be nothing going into the season. Oregon was thought to be number 1. They're both undefeated. Indiana has fought their way up to number 5 overall and number 7 in the rankings. And Oregon standing at 1. So Oregon at number 1, Texas at number 2, BYU at number 3. And I'm telling you, there may be something to this whole Mormonism thing, because listen, they got an answered prayer in Utah on Saturday night, late Saturday night. And so they're hanging on by a thread. And then number 4 is Miami. Listen, Miami's there after a loss, the first loss of the year, but it honestly should have been their third. They were robbed, or they robbed Virginia Tech, rather. And there was one other game, maybe Wake Forest, or I don't remember which one. It's been a while, that Miami should have lost. They played with fire all year long, but because Clemson took a second loss last week, Miami's still in the catbird seat in the ACC. Kind of them and SMU. And so from there, you've got number 5. Well, that's how the rankings go for the playoff seeding rather. The rankings go Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, first 10-win season in program history, I believe. Definitely, and they just happen to be 10-0 without a loss. BYU, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Miami falling all the way to 9 from number 3, I believe. It's from number 2. Alabama, Ole Miss, Boise State at 13, Georgia at 12, but they would be the first team out because Boise State at 13 would jump them as the highest ranked group of 5 school, and the second team out being SMU. And listen, SMU and Miami are probably going to meet each other in the ACC championship game, and that the winner of that game will get the number 4 overall seed and a bye. So that leaves the bracket like this. Like I said, Oregon, Texas, BYU, and Miami in that order for the top 4 seeds, and a bye in the playoffs. And then from there, you've got a matchup: 12 seed Boise State against Ohio State, Notre Dame versus Tennessee, a rematch of last year's Peach Bowl. Ole Miss takes on Penn State, and Alabama and Indiana in the 10-7 matchup. All those first round games, which is honestly one of the coolest things that they're doing with this playoff, is that those first 4 playoff games in the first round are all going to be played on campus, which is an awesome. I love that. It's my favorite thing that they did. I was going to be miserable if they decided that that first round game was going to be at um, Nissan Stadium in Nashville, and we're going to call it the Music City Bowl, or they're going to play it at the Liberty Bowl, and they're going to call it um, uh, the Liberty Bowl. Sorry, I don't know why I blanked on that. The bowl game is in the name of the stadium. And so I'm glad that they're doing that on college campuses, because college campuses is what makes this college football great. The pageantry of it. I love it. And so listen, there's a lot of things that can happen. There's honestly too much. You can play what if all day long about what could or should happen, and how do you predict what happens after rivalry week? I mean, after conference championship weekend, to determine it's impossible to look that far ahead. I mean, there's a scenario out there where there's 6 teams in the SEC tied at 6-2 conference record, and then being able to sort through all that is just madness. And I don't particularly know how you're going to do it. But the good thing is for a lot of these teams, including Ole Miss, including Tennessee, including Georgia, there's a lot of wiggle room here. There's you can still control your own destiny. For instance, Ole Miss, you took 2 bad losses earlier. One really bad one, and a home loss in your first SEC game against Kentucky is just awful. Kentucky has won 1 SEC game this year. It was against Ole Miss, and it was in Oxford. It's just a terrible, terrible loss. A black eye of all black eyes. And then you lose to LSU on the road, in which LSU never led in the game until the game was over. The touchdown in overtime won the game. It was the first time they ever led. So you still had everything in front of you, though. So Ole Miss put themselves in a situation to where you had to beat Georgia, and they went out in Oxford Saturday night and just laid the wood to Georgia. They were 1 year removed from being back-to-back national champions, and then there you go with all your goodwill is back. And it's, as if you finish 10-2, which is a big if you know the history of Ole Miss, you've still got to go play at Florida, and you've got to play in a Egg Bowl, which who knows what happens in Egg Bowls, but that's in Oxford. If you finish 10-2, I have a hard time thinking that a team that's 10-2 with a win against Georgia gets left out of the playoff. Well, Georgia is 13th in the poll. They are, I mean, 12th. I'm sorry, 12th in the CFB playoff poll ranking, and there's the first team out. They've got 2 losses. They lost to Alabama, and they lost to Ole Miss. But they go and play, or rather, Tennessee comes to Athens this weekend and plays. Tennessee is ranked 7th. I believe it was 7th, 6th or 7th in the polls tonight. And so you can't tell me that if Georgia beats Tennessee this weekend, that they don't jump all the way in, and then Tennessee's wondering. There's a lot of teams out there that just think that they control their own destiny. Texas A&M has one SEC loss this year to South Carolina, and they have a home loss to Notre Dame, or to Notre Dame, and so they've got two losses. One of them being in the SEC, but they still play Texas in rivalry week. They host Texas, and so you can say both of those teams control their own destiny, and that's when we get back into the oh my goodness, there could be 6 SEC teams with 6-2 conference records and 2 losses overall. And so I don't really know what happens, but the great thing about it is that you can, for a lot of these teams, it's all in front of you. Very few teams have a cakewalk into the playoff. I believe Oregon has a cakewalk into the playoff. They'll have I'll pull up their remaining schedule, but Oregon will play at Wisconsin, and then they will play Washington at home. They will be heavily favored in both of those games, and then they'll play in a Big Ten. I'll never get these conferences right. It'll take me a long time, but you will get to the Big Ten championship game, and win, lose, or draw, you're going to be in because you will have been undefeated, and that would be your only loss as a championship game loss to Ohio State because Ohio, you've already beaten Ohio State, so I mean you're both in. Congratulations. Conversely, I think Ohio State is a lock to get in. I'll be honest with you, I may be the only one that thinks this, but because Indiana is the darling, but in 2 weeks Ohio State plays Indiana, and I have no faith at all that Indiana is going to hang with Ohio State. I think Ohio State races them, and I think they just put a statement on the year. They end the year with Michigan at home, and that's just that. So we're going to get some thoughts on Indiana, I'm sure, in a minute. We're going to have a special guest on the show. My man Daniel Greer with Bluff City Media and the Grizz 901 postgame show is going to join us here in 5 to 10 minutes. And we'll get his thoughts on it. But, yeah, so Indiana, listen, I guess you control your own destiny. But what you hope for with Indiana is a miracle win against Ohio State in Columbus, or keep it close enough to where both parties could really win out of this. An 11-1 Indiana team with a close loss to Ohio State, and then they closed the year out with Purdue at home. I mean, Purdue is 1-8 on the season. They're pathetic, and so there's not really any room for them to mess up. Indiana has not played a single team this year that has been ranked, or that is ranked when they played them. They did just play Michigan, but until they played Michigan, they did not play a single team for the whole season that had even received a vote in the AP Top 25 rankings. So the schedule is really bad for Indiana. Now, to them credit, what I always say on the $2 Sports Show, and it's a motto I kind of live by: if you're going to play bad teams, beat them badly. And Indiana has done that. They have covered every single spread they've played until they played Michigan this week. And so they deserve a lot of credit. And listen, I love their coach. Any coach that comes from James Madison, Kurt Cignetti comes from James Madison into the Big Ten to a bottom dweller at Indiana, a basketball school of all basketball schools, and say, I just win, Google me. Like, dude, you've got me. And he's backed it up. Unfortunately, just their schedule stinks. And so, they didn't get any of the good Big Ten matchups. And that's Michigan's fault, really, because Michigan should be better. But they don't play Penn State. And I don't believe they play Minnesota or any team that really matters out of the Big Ten. Another team that I think is pretty comfortable is Penn State. Listen, Penn State is going to be a mainstay in this program, in this 12-team playoff. And it's because they are always the third best team in the Big 12. Big Ten. Now the Michigan's down; they're the second base team, but James Franklin is just he never wins the big one. He's going to go 10-2 or 11-1 every single year, and every single year they're going to lose to Ohio State and Michigan or the other Big Ten school. So they don't play Oregon this year, and so Penn State's going to be in the playoff every single year. They're 8-1 right now. They closed the year out with Purdue, like I said, 1-8, Minnesota 6-4, Maryland 4-5. So they're going to finish the season 11-1. They're going to try to get into the playoff. I'm not really sure how the Big Ten playoff works, but Ohio State has a win over them. So it'll be Ohio State and Oregon in the matchup. And so if you're Penn State, you're hoping for Oregon to give Ohio State a second loss, and maybe Penn State jumps in if there's only 2 Big Ten teams that get in. I think there will be more. And other teams that are safe, listen, I hate it, but Notre Dame is safe. They play Virginia this week. They are currently 8-1 with their only loss being an ugly black eye to Northern Illinois. But you close the year with Virginia at home. You play Army at home, which is tricky, and don't take them lightly. It is a team that takes a massive amount of time and energy to prepare for, but you should beat them. You will be a favorite. And then you end with USC, University of Southern California, who is 4-5 on the year and just falling apart. I know they got the big win over LSU to start the season, but then they benched Miller Moss. And so, listen, they should win that game. And at that point, Notre Dame, not affiliated with a conference in football, is going to be 11-1 to end the year. The media loves them. They will be in. At this point, I'm just talking about teams that have a pretty good lock in. Alabama finishes the season at home to Mercer. If you've heard of them, they play Oklahoma at the road. Oklahoma's 5-5. Their first year in the SEC has not been good. And then they play the Iron Bowl at home. Iron Bowl, Auburn's 3-6 on the year. Hugh Freeze is, man, I'd hate to be the guy that reads Hugh Freeze's mail and sorts through his mail, because that the folks in South Central Alabama hate him right now, and they are the kind to maybe sprinkle some white powder in an envelope and send towards his address. So very vengeful folks down there. And if they lose to Alabama after Nick Saban finally retires to just polish off a dud of a season in which they had no quarterback play, well, Hugh Freeze is going to be just he's not going to sleep good at night, and he is going to have a list of people to blame, because if he doesn't have a long list of people to blame, he's going to run out of names, and he's not going to take any of the blame for himself. Trust me, he used to coach it for my team. Ole Miss. Listen, I've went a long time. I haven't really spent a lot of time on Ole Miss, but the truth of the matter is that Ole Miss had a really bad loss to Kentucky to start the year. That was a home loss. Home as in Oxford, loss to Kentucky, a Kentucky team that only put up 23 points, I believe, and you just didn't look good. That's just bad. That Kentucky has one SEC win this year. It's against Ole Miss, an Ole Miss team that's now ranked number 11. And spoiler alert, they just beat Georgia. But then you lose to LSU on the road, and that's a game that you don't typically, you don't care to lose that game. Like, that was baked into the calculus when you go into the season, is a loss to LSU because you're playing at night in Death Valley. But the way that game worked out is that LSU never led that game until they ended the game in overtime. They tied the game with seconds to go in the fourth quarter. For the first time, it was tied. And then Ole Miss kicks a field goal when they get the ball first, and then LSU scores a touchdown. So they actually led for 0 seconds of the football game, but won. And so just awful 2 games that you just look back and it's like literally one play in each game you could change, and Ole Miss is 10-0 right now. instead of being in a situation where you have to beat Georgia. And let me tell you something. I'm an Ole Miss fan. Um, I hope and pray for the best and expect a lot out of Ole Miss, but no team ever in college football wants to be in a position where you have to beat Georgia to keep your playoff hopes alive. But that's where Ole Miss was at. Ole Miss then goes and dominates Georgia at home Saturday. And if I wasn't just such the most pessimistic Ole Miss fan ever, like expecting the other shoe to drop, if I didn't have that all these scars, I probably would have enjoyed that Georgia game more than I've enjoyed any football game ever. But instead, I was just constantly waiting for just the other shoe to drop, and it was awful. But Ole Miss won, and it puts them right back at 11. And if you're looking at schools that should have a clear path towards the playoff, Ole Miss is one of them. And it's because they end the year with a road trip to Gainesville, where Florida is to be scrappy for a little bit, but then kind of fell off the face of the kind of struggle a little bit when you get to a third string quarterback. And nobody's got a good third string quarterback. So you go to Florida in a week after a bye this weekend, and then you play a home game in the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. You win that game, and I believe you're in. The only thing that holds you back is possibly just a log jam at the top of the SEC standings with, like I've talked about, 5 or 6 teams in tied for first place in the SEC, and how does that calculus work out? At that point, you're wishing there may be more than 12. You wish that there were more than 12 teams in the playoff. I don't know. My man Chris Utroska's in the comments here. Big Mississippi State fan. Check out Hanging Moss Media. He does a lot of outdoor photography, hunting, guided hunts with that he'll a photograph. He loves doing weddings and he loves doing graduation portraits. So check out Hanging Moss Media. Thanks for being in the comments, Chris. See you in a week or so. Jekyll, thanks for being in here. Rebs and throw it up here. Rebs and Bama are in a good spot. Win out, probably no SEC champ, but in the playoffs. Listen, I think that is the easiest way for Ole Miss and Alabama to get in. Alabama holds a lot of tiebreakers if they go to like strength of schedule. However, for Ole Miss, like you don't, as an Ole Miss fan, I don't really want to risk playing in the SEC championship game. Ole Miss has never been in Atlanta to play in an SEC championship game, so I do want to tick that box at some point. But honestly, I don't think that a 3-loss Ole Miss team with a loss to Georgia or Texas in Atlanta gets in. So I'd much rather be third in the SEC, dodge Atlanta, and get into like the bottom half of that bracket, maybe even playing a road game in game one, in round one of the playoff. So good thoughts there. Thanks for hanging out with me. We do have a special guest here. So this dude is way more famous than me. Going to get Daniel Greer in here of the Grizz 901 post-game show. Check out Daniel after every single Grizzlies post-game show on Bluff City Media's YouTube page. Daniel, DG, what up? Vanderbilt.
I don't know. The shirt was given to me, so I'm wearing it. I've had it for so long. It's a champion special. It's like it's old school, but I think
you either got it a long
there.
time ago or you got it at Walmart. It was one or the other.
Somebody played there. They gave it to me. Whatever. I'll wear it.
Yeah. Thanks for hopping in. Hey,
man.
And appreciate you texting me and being like, "Hey, your mic's off." So really saving the day here.
Right.
All right. So for everybody that doesn't know Daniel, he's on Driving the Line, betting enthusiast. Check out Drive the Line as well. He's got Jonathan Coachman on there with him a lot. Any old school wrestling fans. And so check out them on Drive the Line. But he likes to place wagers, and you can do that in the state of Tennessee. And there's no one he loves more than Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. Right. Talk about them.
So Indiana, I heard you on the show already, talk about them covering every single game until last week when they had a 14 to 14.5 spread against Michigan. I didn't love it. I didn't think that they would cover it. I had to play it because I won 9 in a row. And so the 10th one, I have to play it. You've already made me money. I will back you into the abyss.
Right.
But if you look at it, and I want to look at a little bit of the lines because I want to ask you, I would assume you haven't looked at any of the lines coming out for this week, but also some look ahead lines as we're looking through. And so if we're just looking at this, I'm going to go with ESPN because it's the easiest right now, just because it has them more in one place. Everybody knows what ESPN is. But if you look at Tennessee, Georgia, if you had to guess, Georgia at home going up against a higher ranked Tennessee, 7-12. What do you think the line might be, Drew?
Well, I've heard rumblings today. Chris Felica, formerly of ESPN, is started the maybe Nico is not playing. So even without that, I think the Georgia I would say Georgia at home, 3.5 or 4.
What if I told you 10?
Jeez. Okay, that tells me Nico's not playing. That's what
Yeah, that's exactly. So on that, do you think that helps or hurts Tennessee? Because let's say you have a banged up Nico that you put out into this game and you lose to Georgia. Okay. That's not great. But let's say
hedging. I hate that. Yeah.
Let's say you don't play Nico and you still lose. You look better to the committee. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing too is like there's still 3 weeks left, and so I wonder how they retain that. Like if Nico comes back, because listen, Tennessee still got to get up and play Vanderbilt,
Right.
So I'm sort of kidding there, but listen, there's a lot of similarities between Tennessee and Ole Miss this year. The volatile offensive play, Nico came out like with his hair on fire, and then it seems like their whole offense kind of took a step back. They started winning their games on the defensive line, and the defensive line is still incredible. And you saw what Ole Miss did to Georgia, and so I think the defensive side of the ball for Tennessee is going to be amped up to play that game.
Right.
But Tennessee only has one loss. It's a bad loss. Lots of warts on that Arkansas loss.
Right.
But you've only got one in the SEC where everybody other than Texas has 2.
Yep.
So you do have a little bit of a cushion. If you want to posture yourself and say, oh, we had a backup quarterback, you could probably get a long way with it since you've only got one loss.
Yeah, and if you look at this, you also look at a team that's dominated defensively. Do you know the most points that they've allowed the other team to score this year?
Tennessee, that is?
Tennessee.
I believe Arkansas put up some points, didn't they?
Arkansas did not. Arkansas put up the most points against them, though.
Okay, so I guess
19.
I'm right. Oh,
that's it. They have not allowed 20-plus points the entire season.
Yeah, so let's just draw that parallel a little bit further then with Ole Miss. So Ole Miss had the most points that they've allowed this year. So in overtime, they allowed 29 to LSU. So not as good, but outside of the 29, it's 20 against Kentucky. And I mean, you only gave up 10 against Georgia. Listen, that's a game that I'm absolutely interested in. If you're a Tennessee fan, and we've got lots of them that listen to this network, like if we're talking, I know it's not like a hot thing to say, like you get canceled for saying like, dude, if you got a concussion, like take some BCs, get out there. We got to play Georgia, like.
That gets you canceled now, Drew. You can't say that kind of stuff. You can't be mean.
I'm telling you, we both know Tennessee fans that are saying that exact thing. Like, bro,
100%.
Take an Advil.
Yeah, but honestly, like we talked about it. They have one loss. You're going into a Georgia team that's pissed off. Georgia loses, and they come out with 3 losses. They're at a struggle to really get in. They're already on the outside looking in. I wouldn't. Yeah,
it's done.
Pretty much done on the season. Usually 3 losses at this point, even though it was different in the past. I believe that this 12-team playoff is looked at different than it has been. And there's a lot of good teams that can get in there and jump you. I think they would be done. I had a loser leaves town match last week, and it was it Alabama, LSU?
It was true.
And LSU out. So that's what we're looking at.
So the crazy thing about LSU is that they're not necessarily out, but they need a huge logjam at the top because they hold. If it goes all the way to like the last tiebreaker, or the third tiebreaker, it's like strength of schedule in which LSU would get the nod, and one of their losses is out of the conference, and so as a 3-loss team, you could, with 2 losses in the SEC, if you could backdoor your way into Atlanta and win, then you would get a bye.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about some bid stealers. We talked about Indiana a little bit earlier. A lot of people, love the NCAA basketball. We're talking about bid stealers right here in possibly Boise State. Obviously, you have, you're going to have a conference winner in BYU, and so that's not really as much. But then you have the Indiana team that is jumping up there to the point of they might have lodged themselves into the playoff because of all these teams picking up the 3 losses in the SEC.
Yeah.
And you're talking about they haven't played a great schedule, and I agree. If they hang close, even if they don't hang close, if they're within 2 touchdowns, I really still think that gets them in because you're talking about a team that's 2 touchdowns and Ohio State being who Ohio State is. I just think that they still somehow get in. But I don't.
Is there an early line on that game yet?
Yeah. Do you know what it is?
It's in Columbus, right?
It is in Columbus.
I don't know, like 18.5, 20.
So it opened up at 6.5, and now it's jumped to 9.5.
No, okay, yeah, give it to me. Put the house note on it. So
I agree. Put the house note on the Hoosier train. I like it. I like it, Drew. I'm kidding.
That is pretty nice. So listen, my thing with bid stealers is, so Boise State could get their way into the 4 seed, with a bye if they're the highest ranked conference opponent. If the situation plays out like we just talked about with LSU winning the SEC, then Boise State very well could sneak in and be the highest ranked conference champion or the 4th highest ranked conference champion.
Yeah.
What the SEC wants right now, and what I want selfishly as an Ole Miss fan, and I know we've got a lot of Tennessee fans and Alabama fans around. What I want is you look at the ACC and you look at the Big 12, and BYU seems to be running away with the Big 12. I want them to continue to run away with the Big 12. The teams behind BYU have kind of faltered a little bit. There was Iowa State earlier in the year, Kansas State, Arizona. None of those have panned out. They've all got multiple losses. You want BYU to just go ahead and win out. However, if BYU takes a loss in the conference championship to Kansas State, do you think BYU still gets in? That's where I struggle.
So
I don't know that.
What are the 4 conferences? Obviously, the SEC, the Big 10,
the Big 12, and the ACC are the 4.
So the ACC would be. I keep forgetting about them. Who's coming out of the ACC?
So that's the thing. They've kind of cannibalized themselves too. Right. Miami just took their first loss.
Right.
SMU's 1 loss, and Clemson's got 2 now.
It's got to be.
After they lost to Louisville, and so I think it's going to come down to the ACC championship game between Miami and SMU, and at that point, does loser get the Outback Bowl? Like, do you really get into the playoff as a 2-loss ACC team when there's really just 2 teams that are good in the whole conference of 16 or 18, whatever they are now?
It has to be Miami at this point because you're looking at SMU being 8-1, Clemson 7-2.
Right.
I don't expect if Miami doesn't get into, because who does Miami have left? Just looking through this real quick.
So they'll have Florida for sure. I'm not sure what they've got other than that.
Miami does not. They play Wake Forest and Syracuse.
Oh, I'm sorry. Florida and Florida State play, not Florida and Miami.
Yep, correct.
Florida and Miami's already played week 1. Florida beat the ever-living snot out of
you mean
Miami beat Florida.
Right. It was bad. It was ugly.
You should have known what was coming the rest of the season for that. So that's my thing on bid stealers is I feel like you've got to have a resume at that point. And if you're an SEC school or you're a Big 12 school like Indiana or Ole Miss or Tennessee, or you want 1 bid because you're getting 1 out of the group of 5, getting 1 out of the ACC and 1 out of the Big 12.
Right.
That leaves you 5 spots? 8 spots, 9 spots to divvy up between 2 conferences.
Yeah, but you got to look at you could have a bid stealer, and let's say SMU wins out and they go to the championship game and they win, and Miami wins out. Miami is still ranked ninth. They're not going to get much worse than that. Then Miami is a bid stealer in a sense to the SEC or honestly the Big Ten. Is they're taking away another spot because they really should be the only ACC team there. But if they only have one loss, and I know it just came to Georgia Tech, but it was on the road. It was a close game. You could serve up a lot compared to saying, hey, well, that team's got 2 losses already. That team's got 3 losses. I know they're in the almighty SEC. It'd be hard to pull back from that.
I'm not going to pretend like there's not like some inherent bias with me. Like I see all these teams. I truly believe they're the best, like with the exception of like Oregon and Ohio State. Like I don't really know what other teams. But if you look at what the committee did, so Miami lost their first game and they dropped them down to 9th behind one loss Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Notre Dame. Like they didn't put them above any one-loss team other than Boise and SMU.
Right.
And so SMU as a one-loss team is all the way down at 14. So I don't feel like the committee respects the one loss, like the strength of schedule. That's the thing that bothers me, is because you've got numbers. If it just plays out now, you've got numbers 9 and number 14 playing for a conference championship. I don't see a scenario where the loser stays at 11.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it. Since we're talking about it here, is this the right one you've been using? I would say.
Yeah,
okay.
that's it.
So if we're looking at this and just kind of going over it, obviously, as Uncle Buck was talking about, is you're having Miami there as the highest ranking of the ACC teams, right? That would get in there as be an automatic bid. But the problem with that is what you're discussing is that they're down there at 9 under Notre Dame, Tennessee, and they have 1 loss. But the thing is, they're above everybody else with 2 losses. I don't see a scenario where the committee, if Miami wins out, let's just say Miami wins out as they are, and Alabama, Ole Miss, Boise State, everybody underneath them wins out as well. If everything stays the same, somehow if SMU or honestly Clemson was to jump in and win the ACC, that has to push them up. And honestly, that pushes them up into the playoffs. That is the true bid stealer. And I don't think there's any way any of those other teams jump Miami. And so at the worst spot, I think Miami's in their worst spot right now, and that's at 9. I don't think they go down from here, throughout the entire year. They played 2 teams that are trash the rest of the season. They lost their game that they should have won. They play Wake Forest at home, and they go to Syracuse, which Syracuse has been good, especially in the Dome.
Right.
But besides that, I don't expect them to lose to Syracuse, even though I think it's Kyle McCord. He's the quarterback for Syracuse, has been pretty good.
Yeah, former Ohio State guy, I believe. And my thing with Miami, though, too, is that I've held on to like this should be lost 3 if we're just being honest with each other. And I wonder if that plays any role. And I'm not saying that it should, but like I watched Virginia Tech catch a Hail Mary to beat them that was ruled incomplete. Like we all saw this. And so that's the reason why the best win Miami has this year is just looking through
There's
here.
not one. That's the problem.
At Louisville, that Virginia Tech at home, which you didn't win. I guess technically you did, and then you lost to Georgia Tech on the road. Georgia Tech, who was with the win, took them to 6-4. They got bowl eligible.
Right.
So just, I don't know. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I just don't put a lot of stock into them. And as an Ole Miss fan, shoot, I'd love to play Miami. Give me Miami.
Yeah, I don't think. Looking back at this again, looking at these teams, let's say, okay, because you're an Ole Miss fan, I'll get your honest opinion. Who out of these teams scares you all the way top to bottom? Is there any team that you're saying, hey, I don't want to match up against them in the first round. I want to match up against them in the second round. After that, it's kind of is what it is. But first or second round, I want to kind of avoid these teams.
Listen, we just beat Georgia, so I'm on a high, if I'm being honest with you. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we can take anybody. Ole Miss's strength is their defensive line. So I look at offensive lines, and Notre Dame always has just a really good offensive line, and so I see them as a a potential problem with your best asset, not a good matchup with what is our best asset. Um, Listen, if teams I'd love to play, I'd love to. If you can get the 5 seed, which is a pipe dream, if I'm being honest, that's going to go to whoever doesn't win the Big Ten, in my opinion. Uh, but if you get the 5 seed and play Boise State and then feed into Miami for a shot at the semifinals, like, dude, sign me up for that. But Alabama always gives me scars. Lane Kiffin does not do well against Alabama. There's a lot of baggage there. There's a lot of you can always tell he presses a little too hard against Alabama. So don't really love that. The rest of them, I kind of take them. And honestly, if you get to the playoff, it's a win. I do not want the team to feel this way, but like it's a massive success to get there.
Right.
And then I'm kind of rooting for just like in bowl games. I've always rooted for like matchups that you never see. Like I'd love to see Ole Miss in a Rose Bowl against Ohio State, or just something prestigious. I'd love to see Notre Dame come to Oxford and play a first round playoff game. Like that would be a name. Like that'd be amazing.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm looking at for. I need some different matchups. I swear.
Yeah.
And I said this about baseball is there were so many divisional rivals that met into the second round. And I'm pissed off. I'm like, hey, listen, I get it. I know that there's a lot of rivalry to these games, but give me something different. I don't care about seeing the Dodgers. Who are they playing? Was it San Diego, the Padres, or somebody else? I don't want to see. I don't care about all that. I don't need to see the Mets play. Was it the Nationals?
So the Mets,
Phillies.
Yeah, the Phillies. That's right. Yeah. And I'm with you on that. And I don't really know how you do it, but baseball is especially worse because those divisional opponents. I think you play like 16 times a year or something like that, 18 times a year. That's one of the reasons why I'm glad that the NBA got away with divisions. You just kind of play all the Western Conference the same. The 12-team playoff allows for a lot of new blood too. Like, in what world are we really talking about before this year? Talking about Indiana being in a playoff. Like, in what world? Ole Miss, for that matter.
Right. Well,
it's great.
I've already been given approval from said Jonathan Coachman, coach, to have a live Driving the Line show if Indiana was to play Tennessee. I've already had that one approved. And I believe that I could somehow talk them into Ole Miss because I know I can get there. So if Indiana somehow makes their way and gets to Neyland Stadium or somehow gets down to the Grove, I promise you we'll be there, and we'll have a crew packing for sure. So I that's what I want. I care less about anything else. I just need them to get close to me so I can at least wear my Indiana hat again and go to a game.
Yeah. Do you worry about your boy leaving after one season? Because if I'm Auburn, like, give me Kurtzik. Let's just
Auburn
throw the baby out with the bathwater and go for.
He could do much better than Auburn. He could do much. In my
I'm
opinion,
an Auburn hater myself.
Yeah, so. I'm not a big Auburn fan. I think what happens is Kirk Cincinnati. I think he stays if I think there will be money thrown his way. He's made a lot of money just from bonuses this season already, going into next year within his contract. But if it was me, I'm trying to figure out a way to maybe move this into Florida would be a great potential because they're going to need a coach and a no nonsense coach. The only issue is they're going to get rid of their AD for that to happen. I would not go there with the AD that's currently there.
Auburn and Florida, in my opinion, are, it's like that old Office meme. It's like they're the same picture. My thing with Florida, I've always said this, is Florida is Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer away from being South Carolina. Like, and I know you can't really say that because it was done, but like they run off Dan Mullen, who was perfectly fine and was getting to access bowls.
Yeah.
And then since then, they never hire the right guy, I guess. No. And I don't know if that's an athletic department failure. I think it is more than it is like on the coach.
Yeah, it's definitely on Scott Strickland, who's the AD there.
Yeah.
He's hired so many bad people and made so many bad decisions that You have
And
to kind of look yourself in the mirror at that point and say, all right, we got rid of Dan Mullen, who was winning. Like he was
Right.
winning. He just wasn't. He wasn't the sexy hire. He didn't get the sexy guys in. In all honesty, he didn't. Like they were never going to be
No.
a team that would just kind of run off from you, like the Urban Meyer, like Steve Spurrier teams. You got to have fun in Florida. Like that's you're down in Florida. People go there for vacation. They think of Florida as the high flying, spread out offense, and that's what you have to have. You're hiring the wrong guys, and that's what Kirk Signe would be the wrong guy, but his offense is electric.
Yeah,
even though he's 63.
And I tell you what, Scott Strickland, the nail in his coffin. You wouldn't think this at Florida, being the football powerhouse that they are, but their men's basketball coach just found himself in a lot of trouble.
Yep.
And they're Scott Strickland is in total life preservation mode. He threw him back on the sidelines despite all these allegations. He put out a statement supporting Billy Napier because if one of those two goes down, so does he. So what choice does he have?
Yep, he's gonna have to. I don't know how much longer you got. I'm gonna have to get out here in a few minutes, but I want to know like kind of predictions on your end for the college playoffs and what this ends up looking like, and if there's like a matchup that you want to see. Because if it's me, I'm looking at currently. You're thinking that Oregon runs this right at that point, and then they're going to opposite them of Ohio State. Let's say they do meet somehow, some way. Whichever I think is going to be the 1 or the 5, like you were talking about earlier. And at that point, that's the best case scenario because I don't want to see them in a second round matchup. That would be stupid. Just same thing with the SEC.
What do you really? I mean, I guess Oregon and Ohio State doesn't have that fatigue yet. Like we hadn't seen them in the same conference for a long time, but that is a conference matchup. You know, that we'd be saving for the semis, I guess. But
and you possibly could have already seen it. We saw it this year. Let's say they do it again in the championship game, and they're going to do it a third time in one season. That's not what I want to see. Everything else, I'm cool. I don't want to see it 3 times in a season.
Yeah, to me, I'm not seeding yet, but I'm looking at. I'm trying to figure out how many teams get in from each conference, and like I said, I don't see a second team getting in out of the Big 12 at all, and at most you're going to get 2 out of the ACC, but I don't really buy any of those teams unless they just don't want to put in a 5th or 6th SEC team. You know, I think at best you're going to get 4 out of the Big 10, and that's with a respectable loss or a win against for Indiana. And then SEC, like it's just, I don't know what it's going to come down to. You just hope to, as an Ole Miss fan, you've got one of the best wins in the SEC, and that's what you hang your hat on. But
I honestly, I see if I'm looking at this, I think that we have 4 Big 10 teams and 4 SEC teams. That's your 8. And then you have your 2 conference champions at your 10. That's where it gets okay. So there you go. So that's 11, right? That's where I think that we're stuck there because you know logically you're going to get Oregon, you're going to get Ohio State. Those are guarantees.
Yes,
you're going to get Texas, Tennessee at this point because those are the top. The 4. Are those the only guaranteed teams? If as long as nothing blows up in anybody's face, that's the guaranteed teams.
I have a hard time thinking anybody's guaranteed because there is a above 40% chance that Texas loses to A&M the last week of the year, and Tennessee's probably going to go lose to Georgia, who's coming off of a loss. So that puts everybody at 2 losses. And so I don't know how you do it. You just, if you're an SEC team, you're really needing, who did we say that SMU? You need Miami to go get another loss. You need SMU. You need the ACC to have 1 bid. That's
right.
It.
That's the only thing you can have.
And you really would love Indiana to fall on their face, and let the Big 10 have 3 obvious teams, the same 3 that's going to get in every single year out of the Big 10.
Yeah, because you have 9 SEC teams ranked right now, and honestly, I had no idea that South Carolina was ranked. No idea. I've not paid attention.
They've come on strong. They had that huge beatdown of Texas A&M.
Right. And them and LSU are the 3 lost teams. Then The other two loss teams, one that we don't ever talk about is Missouri, who I think they're frauds.
Pass.
They're not very good. But Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas A&M or Texas A&M, and then Tennessee. All they all have either 2 or 1 loss.
Right.
And so you're talking about 6 teams there. Maybe they do get the 5.
And so if you take the top 5 out of the SEC as it is right now, you're looking at Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. But
it's crazy.
I still see A&M lurking down there, and whereas I wouldn't buy a ticket for them, like that game in rivalry week is going to be my favorite watch because there's lots of history between A&M and Texas, and they hate each other.
Well, speaking of that, so A&M and Texas, they also have A&M's got to go into Auburn. I don't see any chance that A&M, even though I think Auburn stinks, I don't see a way that going through those games back to back, they come out 2-0 in those last 2 games. I think that they win. I believe it's this week. They have a team, I think this at New Mexico. Yeah, New Mexico State. Yeah. And then they go to Auburn, and then they're at home against Texas. I don't see how they run the table. That would give them 3 losses if they didn't.
Well, the thing with Auburn is like, have they given up? In this NIL era, you've got to re-recruit seemingly by the week the players that are on your team. And I know Hugh Freeze is a heck of a recruiter, and he talks well with the players, and they all would go to war for him. But at 3-6 right now with A&M, I mean, how many of those upperclassmen are protecting their investment at that point?
True. Yeah, but there's honestly a lot of that too is what players aren't on tape too. And at that point, this late in the season, you get some guys out there that might honestly they're playing to find a spot, whether it's with Auburn or with another team somewhere else, another NIL, a bag of money somewhere. They're playing for their life, and so they're not on tape. You don't know who they are, and all of a sudden they just wow you, just like, okay, well, there you go.
And of all teams right now in this landscape that's doing well with high school recruiting, it's Auburn. And so if you tell me that some of the upperclassmen look for a payday elsewhere, protect their investment kind of thing, they've got a load of freshmen there, top 5 high school recruiting class, I think, that maybe start surprising people. And so maybe it's there. A&M is not ungettable. They don't have a good quarterback. They seem to flip-flop, but the defense is always there. To me, that game just feels like when that defense against Peyton Thorne, they're just going to sit on you.
I love it, man. I love talking football. I have to do it a lot, and a lot of my expertise that when I play a lot of games and a lot of bets, they've been first quarter bets, first half bets, and then both teams to score in the first quarter. Those just because it makes sense for me, because when you get past halftime, a lot of it's adjustments within these coaches. You're talking about guys that are, players that are in their 20s. There's a lot that's unscripted. There's a lot of movement and a lot of changes. And so I look at that. I can tell you a lot about the first half. So a lot of these teams and how they and how they're scripted and how they come out. But after that, it's kind of up in the air for me. And so I enjoy watching, especially after the first quarter. I'm like, all right, now I can be a fan. I don't have to cheer for my pockets. And so
if you do first drives, Ole Miss's offense scores a touchdown on the first drive almost every single game, except for this Georgia game, unfortunately. But that scripted drive that Lane and Charlie Weiss or whoever puts together always hits. And then they may look like trash. That first drive looks good.
Yeah, and that's what people don't understand. And if you look at it, if a team does go early on into a game, they go 3 and out or 5 and out, just look at their second drive, because I promise you, they have about 10 to 12 plays that are already scripted and that they're going to keep rolling on. They're going to start fresh, maybe throw in a new one to kind of a new wrinkle to start that drive. But they're just going to pick back up on the other plays that they did not have a chance to go after.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you hopping in here and hanging out with me, Daniel. This has been a lot of fun. We're going to try to do this on every Tuesday night after the college football. I think we've got probably just 3 more, and then we'll do a massive one for the grand reveal. But next week I'll have my co-host with me. Daniel, you're welcome to join. Buckets will more than likely join me, and we'll talk about the college football playoff polls that just come out. And so appreciate everybody hanging in here with me. And if you're in Bluff City Media for the first time, if you're in the YouTube for the first time, if you're in the Twitter for the first time, follow us on both. Bluff City Media, we've got 1,000 different shows that you can check out. Just 10 out of 10. Pick one.
So I believe the executive producer, Kenny Stubblefield, is in the building. I'm not sure exactly what he wants to talk about, but he can take my spot. I've warmed this up. I don't know how much longer you have, but if he's here, it's only
all
right
my
to
kids
let
are
him in.
asleep. We still got some people in here, so we'll keep going.
So let's trade out. I'll dip out. Y'all have a great night. I'll be obviously probably listening, but my wife just had ACL surgery this morning at 5 a.m. It sucked.
Ooh.
So I'm gonna go to bed here shortly, but it's been fun. I had to hop on here, and as soon as I gave her last pain med for the night, I was able to put her to sleep
you're going to sleep
bit.
now, honey.
yeah, you go to bed, baby. All right, so I'm gonna hop
appreciate
out.
you, Daniel.
Absolutely, y'all be good.
All right.
Let me in here.
What up?
What
Kenny?
up, man? Dude, you're the
Welcome
man,
to the
dude.
$2 Sports Show.
Listen, this is an honor. Like I get to edit y'all's podcast. I get to have fun with y'all's podcast. I get to watch it every single week behind the scenes. To be in it is like an honor of a lifetime.
Yeah.
You guys, you and Rusty are the man.
I appreciate you coming in here. You're going to have some work to do because Daniel texted me about 9 minutes into this, and I think my mic was muted. So I tell you, the
over.
flying solo thing, I can make it like 10 seconds on a muted mic, and Rusty's like, "Hey, bro,"
bro.
But I'm flying solo. Like,
Man.
didn't even think about it. So, you got any thoughts? The playoff rankings came out tonight. Second week of the college football playoff rankings. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I wondered where Memphis was.
I can tell you where they were.
Where's Memphis? Memphis was not in there. I didn't see him.
Right.
It was a typo. Was it a typo? Is that?
Well, I think what it is once they get past 25, they move it to like Tubi, where they do like 26 through 95, and y'all are somewhere in the second or third hour of that show.
We're in the back end of that show. Part of it. Damn, that's rough.
I'm telling you, like, being Bluff City Media, being a Memphis-based company, even though Rusty and myself are not.
Oh no,
Rusty is a Memphian now. You know, he's now a Memphian, but me not. Like, I was really hoping to be able to like have some cross-pollination with the Memphis folks on our show, and it just hadn't gone that way.
Yeah, man, they lost to Navy and then lost to UTSA, and I think the worst part about it is Memphis has like zero margin of error every single year when it comes to football, and especially in a college football playoff setting where you have legitimately, and maybe you can help me understand this better. Is it they are guaranteed one? The G5 is guaranteed one spot in that 12, right?
Right.
Could there have been more potentially, or is it just one?
Yes. No, there could be more. If say there's a magical season where Memphis and Boise are undefeated and they're both ranked in the top 12, then yes, but there's guaranteed one.
Okay.
Like if you remember, Cincinnati happened to be a top 4 seed that year. They were not owed one as a group of 5 school, but they earned it being a top 4 team. And anybody can earn it. But the only guarantees are 4 power conference champions and 1 group of 5.
And 1 group of 5.
Yeah. It can be anybody else.
I think
that
would
would hurt Memphis. I mean, outside of the loss, we'll take it was Navy, the Navy loss, right? That was the big one early. You take that one and just accept that. That was ended up being a decent loss.
Well, I mean, Navy was a top 25 team for the majority of the year, right? So, I mean,
after the Memphis loss, I think is when they kind of made it in there, but then they held on to it for a long time. But if you take the UTSA loss away, let's just pretend like it didn't happen. What hurt Memphis more than anything is that Florida State stunk.
They stunk.
I mean, you look at Boise. Boise's got 1 loss. Their 1 loss is a 2-point loss in Eugene, Oregon. And that's not held against them. Memphis
At
went and
all.
beat
Yeah.
Florida State. If Florida State right now is 7-3, then that win totally counteracts that Army loss or Navy loss.
Yeah. Like if Florida State was somehow in contention in the ACC and they
Yeah.
had gone to Tallahassee and won that game, or even had lost that, like the whole conversation around that game was,
Yeah.
even if they lose that game, but they make a good showing, they're still good, right? Like
Yeah.
they'll still be fine.
If you look at this in college basketball terms, everybody's talking about the RPI.
Right.
What is it now? The BPI, I guess they're doing now, but
Isn't that
the
body fat
RP
percentage? Isn't that BPI? Isn't that the body mass?
Okay.
No, that's BMI. That's BMI.
BMI. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Hey, don't get me crossed up.
I don't know.
I don't look at those numbers.
All I know is I'm off the charts. I'm on day one of the
Cheers.
I'm on,
I'm still on the before side of the weight loss commercial pictures. Yeah. So what Florida State turned into was a bad win instead of what could have been a good loss.
it was such a wild turn of events for them in a matter of 2 weeks, right? Where prior to when the schedule came out, it was, hey, they're going to go to Tallahassee and they're probably going to lose, but man, they could win. They could
win out. Yeah.
They could win out the rest of the way and they could be fine and it'd be okay. Like they could, if they just go show themselves well in Tallahassee, it won't hurt them.
Right.
Within that week after Florida State lost that second game in a row in the second week of the season,
Yeah.
it was like, wait a second, they might actually, like, they have to go out and blow these dudes out or it's going to be bad. Like if they don't go and blow these guys out in Tallahassee, that's going to be held against them. The narrative around that game was so wild. And it was
Right.
Memphis went to Tallahassee and the score might not have looked it, but they dominated that
They
game. from
did.
start
It was
to
a late
finish.
score, I believe. For
Late
Florida
score.
State.
Yeah.
But and it was almost unfair to Memphis to get them at that point because
Yeah.
they lost to Georgia Tech in Ireland, and then Boston College at home. Which early in the season you're kind of taking everything with a grain of salt. But it seemed to me the national narrative changed. Like they put the red alarms were going after the Memphis loss.
Oh,
Instead of giving
absolutely.
Memphis credit, that was the loss that signaled that Florida State has problems, not Memphis is good, which sucks for Memphis.
It does. So let's not talk about Memphis anymore. They're out. They're done.
And then you lost to UTSA, and then it's just like, what are we even doing here?
And again, that's the thing that's the most frustrating is that I think it's not even that they lost. UTSA notoriously in the Alamo Dome is a tough place to play.
Yeah.
They pipe in noise, and it's just, I mean, they had like 4,000 people there, but it was sounded like, the damn, Texas Stadium. It was like crazy. But Seth Hennigan came in after the game and was like, yeah, man, we just couldn't hear. We had false starts because we just couldn't hear ourselves. There's 4,000 people there, Seth. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway,
that's dirty.
It's neither here nor there. I'm super interested in the G5, like in the group of five. Like I've obviously because of Memphis and we also do on the Bluff City Media Network, we do a G5 classified with Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels podcast. And it's great. We love I love talking about the G5 guys. Boise is clearly the G5 going to be the G5 representative, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what they're so let's just look here at the standings. So right now, Boise is the going away the highest ranked team here.
I mean, the 13th.
Yeah, the 13th. Okay, I don't know why I was having a hard time finding this. Here we go.
Yeah.
So 13th. After them, you're Washington State at 18.
Right.
Who is now a group of 5 school because there is no more Pac-12. They were left. And then Army and Tulane at 24 and 25. And so if you look at Boise.
Where are you seeing this? Because I've got I'm looking at my bad. Never mind. I'm looking at
Are you looking at AP?
I am, my bad. Because I was like, wait, Missouri and Tulane's 25. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong thing.
So if you look at Boise's remaining schedule, they play at San Jose State, at Wyoming, and Oregon State at home. Oregon State's at 4 and 5, but you would think that would be the team that maybe give them a shot. But you're playing a 6 and 3 at San Jose State, a 2 and 7 Wyoming team, and a 4 and 5 Oregon State team. I I just don't really see a loss coming there.
No.
I'm not really sure what their standings. So it looks like they would end up playing Colorado State in a championship game for the Mountain West Conference, and I think they've played them already this year. So I'm just looking.
Let me look.
No, they have not played Colorado State this year. So
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
I didn't think they had. They played Washington State already and
Yeah.
beat them by 21 points.
Yeah, it was a big win, and so that's one we kind of talked about on our $2 Sports Show at that going into that for G5, and so yeah, I think that you're looking at you're going to need Boise State to stumble if you're Army or you're Tulane.
Right.
I'm a big believer in Tulane. I don't know how much you
So am
guys
I.
have talked about on your G5. I think that the John Sumrall that they hired there from Troy after Willie Fritz left to go to Houston. No, not Houston.
Yeah, Houston. He's
Was
in
it Houston?
Yep.
Okay. I love John Sumrall.
Mhm.
He was a former Ole Miss assistant and went to Kentucky. He was associate head coach there, and then went to Troy. And he is a program builder. He's not a flashy win quick, fast, and kind of flash in the pan guy. He's going to build it, and he's going to build it right. He's a fantastic hire. I was scared to death Mississippi State was going to hire him. So I love John Sumrall.
Rusty's over there going, "Let's go Mississippi State, get him."
Yeah, they want to just be competitive at this point. They're having bad times. No one's happier to be in Orlando, Florida at Universal Studios than Rusty Witten the week after Ole Miss beats Georgia. Like,
oh my God.
I'm telling you, like I told him I was going to leave him alone this week. Like, dude, don't pick up your phone. Enjoy time with your lady.
Please tell me
you've
been texting him, and
I swear, as soon as the game went final, he's had feet in Orlando for like an hour and a half. And I left him like a 4-minute long voicemail just yelling. Everything he'd ever said to me, I brought it up in like a 4-minute voicemail. And then I forgot everything I said. So I was like, hey, send that back to me when you get a chance. So,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
What kind of you put any stock in? I mean, if we assume that Boise State will get there, I mean, obviously they have a front runner for a Heisman, in Ashton Genty,
Right.
just a
dominant
football player. Can they make any waves, you think, in the playoffs? I mean, or is it just kind of a, hey man, you're there, one and done type of deal? Or I mean,
yeah, collect your your playoff ring, your jacket, all your swag bag, and enjoy yourself. But I don't think. Listen, the 12 seed's going to play the 5 seed. There's a path to a higher seed if you're Boise State, because like we said, they're currently at 13, and so there's a path to a higher seed. But if you're going to sit at 12, like you're going to play more than likely the Big Ten loser of the championship game being Ohio State or Oregon, and they're just going to. I don't think they compete really. Of course, they have competed with Oregon this year.
Competed with Oregon already.
It's a different game at that level, I believe. And I do believe that the playing field is smoothing out between the top of the top and the next level. And then I think the next level is like the G5. I do think that's smoothing out and you're seeing upsets, but I don't think you see those upsets in November and December that you see in September, which is I don't think so. Even as an Ole Miss fan, I would love to draw Boise State.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a matchup thing too, because Ole Miss's strength is their defensive front seven.
Yeah,
and if I'm playing Boise State, I'm putting 9 people in the box and telling that dude like throw it if you want. Like that guy's not beating us, and I think that's what anybody will do against Boise. Like Ashton Genty will run the ball 35 times for 62 yards, and they'll get beat. Like, that's what I think will happen
against Oregon or against an Ole Miss.
I put it to you this way: against anybody in the playoff that's not Indiana.
Wow.
Like
I mean,
listen, there's stud running backs that come from out of nowhere, and they are great college running backs. I believe at this level you can be schemed against, and if you put 10 dudes in the box or 8 dudes in the box, if Ohio State does that or Oregon does that or Alabama or Georgia or Texas does that, it's different. Like, you're going to have to be able to make them sag off, and I don't think that quarterback can do it.
I mean, and if I'm Boise State, I'm looking at a rematch with Oregon, saying our guy ran
be
for
more confident in for sure.
our guy ran for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns against y'all.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Let's do that again.
Oh, there's no doubt that if you're Boise State, that's who you want. Of course, you're not going to get them because
They're
more
going to
than
be
likely
number
they're going to
one,
get a
so-
bye. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. Although if Ohio State jumps up and beats them in the Big 12 championship, Big 10 championship game, then that is absolutely on the table. 12-5 matchup.
Oh my gosh, man.
That'd be a sexy matchup.
That would be a sexy matchup. How excited are you about that it's moved to 12 teams? Like, is it just, does this kind of give you more of a feel of what March Madness is for college basketball? Is that what this is?
Listen,
or
this is my thing, and I think this is an American pastime. Like, Americans
hell
love
yeah.
brackets. Like, you put anything. I mean, what do we do at Christmas time? We put
Oh.
Christmas movies in a bracket. March Madness. Nobody cares about college basketball until March Madness comes around.
Dude.
We love brackets.
The Memphis Flyer, no offense to the Memphis Flyer, who has 0 publication all year, don't do much all year, put out a Grizzlies Twitter bracket every single year, and it creates 4 weeks of hysteria in this city. Whereas,
and is it like media or
Yeah,
ranking your media
well,
bracket?
it's just Twitter. It's just Grizzlies Twitter.
I know.
And they'll match them up against each other and they'll vote.
I think that'll be my goal for 2025.
Yes.
Is to be a 16 seed in the Memphis Flyer.
Yeah.
Memphis personalities bracket.
Exactly. I mean, I have seen people literally rail on Twitter when they lose in their bracket in that Grizzlies. So I'm in agreement with you. Brackets are as American as apple pie and football on Saturdays and Sundays. I mean, it is unbelievable.
I think that there was a lot of hesitation with going to more than 4 teams because you were always there was always the narrative, the correct narrative, that what are you going to do? Make these players that aren't making money play more games so that the university, the institution can profit 3x what they were making and still the players get nothing. Like, that was the hurdle, and that was that you had to get over. Now, like, there's no barriers to it. Like,
none.
I love the bracket. I was a little nervous that it would become like a little the intrigue leading up to it would be not there, because it was always like, who's the 4th seed? Like last year with Florida State got absolutely hosed because Jordan Travis gets hurt, and because they're going to put Alabama in, they had to put Texas in, and Florida State with a hurt quarterback got kicked out.
Okay,
and so
let me ask you this. I know Florida State is what they are now, but that was the right decision, don't you think, last year?
No, listen, I'm one of those, like, it's the right decision and the wrong decision.
For the product. For the product, it was the right decision.
For the product, it was absolutely the right decision. And if you know who's making those decisions, they're not based, they don't care. They don't care about the sport. They care about how much money they can make off the sport. And when you're selling advertising dollars and you can get it ended up being Michigan versus Alabama versus Michigan against Florida State with a backup quarterback. Like, give me Alabama. Yeah. And it's always going to be Alabama. But it was the right call for the product, and the product didn't matter as long as they could sell the most money, and that's what they did.
Right.
But I was really nervous going into the 12 team that you lose kind of the intrigue of like who's in, who's out. but I'm totally wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
because what you've seen this year is that the SEC is cannibalizing themselves. You're going to have 4 to 6 teams all finish at 6-2 in the league, and all going to think that they should be in, and so instead of arguing over the 4 through 6, you're arguing over actually like what 9 through 15.
Right.
You've increased the pool of players of teams that's going to be angry.
Right. So my question to you is, and you might have discussed this. I was doing a live with the 901 Soccer podcast. We obviously some terrible news about Memphis 901 FC. So I haven't heard the majority of your live that you're doing right now. Which SEC teams are getting left out? Like, if you had to pick right now, like if you had to say, because you're right, like you could legitimately look up and go, man, there are how many teams? 8 teams with the same record, 9 teams with the same record. Someone's going to get left out. Who's going to get left out?
You're absolutely right. So right now there are, I'm pulling up the SEC standings. There is 3 teams with 1 loss, and there are 5 teams with 2 losses in the SEC. LSU's got a 3rd loss out of conference.
Right.
So they're out.
Yes.
The way I look at this is you look, this is going to take care of themselves. For instance, 1 loss Tennessee plays 2 loss Georgia this week. If Georgia loses, bye-bye. Tennessee's probably in. At that point, you just got to be Vanderbilt, and you're in. So I'm looking, when you're saying who is for sure in, who's got the easiest path in. Alabama's got nobody, and Auburn. So they play at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is reeling. They're 5-5. Right. They've got a pretty good path in.
Yeah.
Ole Miss probably has the easiest path in when it comes to like the least likely to get upset. And I know that's famous last words. God, I hate even saying it because
could you
as
imagine,
an Ole Miss fan,
could you imagine going to Florida? All right, let's say you beat Florida.
Yeah.
Let's say you beat Florida.
No, I would move to another country. I'd never be able to come back here. Like, we were talking about this at work today. Some of the linemen at work were just kind of like, "Hey, if you go and lose at Mississippi State," I was like, "Don't even say it." Like,
not only you losing the Egg Bowl, but then you could be out of the playoffs.
Yeah. Listen, I lived through 4th and 25, which was I thought the worst thing that could have ever happened to me, and that would make 4th and 25 look like a normal stroll through the park, and
like a Tuesday.
But Ole Miss plays at Florida, and then they host Mississippi State for the Egg Bowl on Black Friday.
They ain't losing to Mississippi State. I'll tell you that right now.
They're not going to lose to Mississippi State, and I don't think they're going to lose to Florida. I think they'll be double-digit favorites in both.
I think so. Yeah.
And so they've got a pretty good path, and outside, that's probably the 2 easiest paths. And conversely, A&M at 5-1 ends the season with Texas, who is also a 1-loss SEC team. Texas A&M's got at Auburn and Texas at home. So that's going to kind of work itself out too. One of those teams is going to end up with 2 losses at least. And then Tennessee, like I said, goes to Georgia. That's an elimination game for Georgia. That's a playoff.
Dude, okay, so here's my thought process on that. If Georgia beats Tennessee, they could be the most dangerous team in the college football playoffs. Like if they get in.
Yeah.
But they could easily lose to Tennessee, don't you think? I mean, they could easily lose that game.
Listen, it's really hard to look at Georgia for me and think like they've got it, because Ole Miss, a team that all year has had their flaws, albeit they've seemed to put it together the last 10 quarters. After coming out against the down at the half against Oklahoma, they blew them out in the second half, blew out Arkansas, and now they've blown out Georgia. That team, like, I'm not a Carson Beck believer in the slightest. And so for Georgia, it's hard for me to put a lot of stock in Georgia, especially by Georgia standards, knowing that Carson Beck is their quarterback and they didn't block for him. And the defense was fine, but it's not Georgia elite. And so to me, they look like they're a step back, and maybe just one step back but in all categories.
Mm. Okay.
That Tennessee, if Nico plays,
Yeah.
that's interesting to me. I think that could go either way. The other side being, you saw what happened after Georgia got beat by Alabama. They went to Austin, Texas, and just smoked Texas.
I mean, just
And
beat the
so
brakes
I
off.
was talking. I've got a good many Tennessee friends, and one of my buddies and I talk every Sunday night. We talk about fantasy football and talk about our college football weekends. And he was like, I was hoping Georgia was going to beat y'all by 70. Like he did not want to see Georgia lose the week before
right.
playing Tennessee.
I'm telling you, that Tennessee Georgia game is the most interesting game of the weekend for me. I think
Absolutely.
That to me is just, I cannot wait to watch that game. It's going to be so interesting.
Yeah.
So you haven't given me. So who do you think? Who's the team that's out? You think, or potentially out? Who's going to get left out? Georgia
right now. I mean, it's Georgia. They've got Georgia at number 12 overall right now. However, you go beat Tennessee, you're going to jump up into the top 10 again. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is right. It's Alabama and then Ole Miss right now is the two highest 2-loss teams. If Georgia beats Tennessee, at that point you've lost to both Alabama and Ole Miss, so you're probably eking up a little bit. Ole Miss and Alabama probably go up to 9 and 10 and maybe 10 and 7 and 8, and maybe Georgia comes in at 10 or 11, something like that. It's going to work itself out more likely than not. It always tends to work itself out. But Georgia's the most obvious for me to get left out because I don't see Tennessee with a loss. I don't know how much they drop. And then Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas, I don't see them getting a third loss.
No, they're going to stay at 2, I think. Yeah. So you think who's going to get the SEC bye? Is it Ole Miss probably?
So, right now, I mean, it's the top 2 seeds are Texas and Texas A&M. That's not going to be
they got to play each other
because they play each other.
Right.
So the winner of that game is going to be in, and then you get into a possibility of like a 5-way tie at 6-2, and I have no idea how you sort that, because I think maybe it's common opponents first, but there's no way that all those teams have played the same opponent. So then I think the next one is like strength of schedule.
I think so.
Which Georgia is going to have a really good strength of schedule. Alabama's got a really good strength of schedule. Georgia plays Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas, and Alabama. So, I mean, it's hard to say that they don't get in. And, of course, Alabama's played all those teams minus Texas,
Right.
So, I don't know, man. It'll probably be a selection. They'll probably make a 1-hour special
without a doubt,
to show who plays in the conference championship. They make everything this massive unveiling. It's a real gripe of mine.
It just matters more, man. It just matters more.
It does. It does. And they will market anything.
Hey, listen, man. Great job. I'm gonna head out. I got a couple of podcasts to edit, but man, I appreciate you and thanks for clearing up and let's go Ashton Jency and the Boise State Cowboys.
Hey, yeah.
What are they?
No, they are the
Broncos. Excuse me, the
Broncos.
Broncos.
That's right. I was like stallions. No,
Stallions.
Right. Horses.
Mares. Are they the mares? What are they?
So appreciate you jumping on. We are going to end this here. Appreciate it. Looks like we got about 150 folks kind of strolled in at one point or another. So
for an unannounced, unplanned college football lot, good job.
Love it. And so now just consider this the announcement. We're doing it again next week.
Let's go.
So appreciate Daniel Greer for hopping in with us. Appreciate Kenny hopping in with us. Check out Bluff City Media. Go ahead and like the YouTube channel, hit the bell so you get all the notifications for all the amazing shows that comes out. And until next time, we'll see you.